Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Ronna, and well, this is kind of a typical post-election show. My guest tonight is Luther Weeks from Connecticut VotersCount. You can find it online at ctvoterscount.org. And it's an organization that conducts audits after every election. And it's also a good source of information about what went right and what went wrong in the election that just passed. So welcome again, Luther. Do you want to just, I'm sure you're probably pretty familiar, but maybe talk a little bit about what your organization does?
Yeah, well, I'm actually involved with two organizations, and Connecticut VotersCount is my organization, and it's dedicated to voting integrity for the benefit of voters in Connecticut, and it has a lot of my opinions on there. So if you look at CT VotersCount, you can see what's happening in Connecticut and some other information from around the country that is of interest, all having to do with voting integrity. And we have another organization, the Connecticut Citizen Election Audit Coalition, ctelectionaudit.org.
Oh, and we didn't put that one up.
That's all right. And I'm the executive director there. Yeah, I'm executive director there. And that's three groups involved in that. Common Cause, Connecticut CCAG, and Connecticut VotersCount. And what we do there is we organize voters to observe the post-election audits in Connecticut, and then we independently report on the results of that audit. So there's two good reasons why we want an independent report. Because number one, we report accurately, which the state has not done, and we report relatively quickly. So we usually report in about 3 or 4 months after the election. We have the audit report out, and the last report done by the state was in November 2011. And if you have a calendar in front of you, you'd know we had a presidential primary then. We had a huge Senate primary, I believe, in 2 different parties. And then we had the election for president and a highly contested U.S. Senate race in Connecticut, plus highly contested race for one House district seat. And as of yet, there's been no report from the state. But you can look at our report, and it'll tell you what they did wrong in the audit and why we got a long ways to go to get the audit right.
And I just want to put a plug in for actually becoming one of the observers. I've done it a few times, and it's pretty eye-opening. And, you know, one of the things we find in New London has a lot of quirky things happen. And so I find that when I go to some suburban towns that shall remain nameless, the people who are counting the ballots have never experienced some of the oddities that come, like, you know, write-in votes for the presidential election. They really had no idea how to deal with it. One audit had a cross-endorsed candidate, and they didn't get that there were 3 numbers that are associated with that and what those meant. So I actually kind of felt like I had to explain because they just didn't know.
Yep. So, yeah, and right now is the perfect time for someone to sign up to be one of our volunteers. And what you do is you volunteer for 1 day to go to a town near your own town, not in your town, and to observe the audit. And I'll guarantee you'll learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
And you can go to either one of our sites, CT VotersCount or ctelectionaudit.org, and the top post on both of those sites will lead you to information about being an observer. We actually have an introductory video now, and the audits actually start on November 20th, and our training starts about 5 days earlier than that. We used to have call-in training. We still have that, but now you can do video training. We got an hour of video training. So once you sign up, and you tell us several dates that you might be available to observe, and then we try and find an audit near your home on one of those days. Even if you sign up for 5 days or 8 days, we're assuming you only want to do it once, but we're going to try and match you up. So now would be a perfect time to look at your calendar, look at the website, learn about it, sign up, and then you'll get access to those videos, and you will know more than some officials when you show up at the audit, and you'll know more than 99.9% of the people know because you'll actually have been in an audit.
And that, yes, by the end of the day, you also know a lot. And I noticed, I mean, I am planning to sign up and knowing what week it is.
Okay.
So they'll be done pretty much the week before Thanksgiving.
No, they'll start. They'll probably go
2 weeks before.
They'll go to,
You think
probably
they'll
go
go
3
past?
They usually go 3 weeks. Sometimes they go 2 weeks. But with Thanksgiving in there, they usually, the Secretary of State kind of, sometimes it's written into law, and other times they have to get to decide when they're going to have them. So, you know, they don't tell me ahead of time, so we'll find out.
And I did notice that a lot of the towns are in the west part of the state this year. Norwalk, I saw, was on a couple, I don't remember. There were a few on this end, but not so much Connecticut coastline as some years, but there are a few around that are convenient for people in this area to get to.
Well, you know, it's 10% of the districts in the state, voting districts, are randomly selected. And, you know, it's pretty random. That part's good, except last year we found out the drawing was not working right. They didn't have the right districts in there. The Secretary of State wasn't able to figure out where the voting districts are in the state and have a random drawing that was fair because they didn't have the right names of the districts. We've announced that we're going to do our own audit of that. Not observing an audit, we're going to audit those districts this year. And I actually think they're going to do a good job because, you know, when you look and you announce you're going to audit something, it seems to work better. The auditors find less problems when you know they're coming.
So just being there makes a difference.
Being there and putting them on notice that we're going to check it out. We're going to report. And hopefully we'll report that part of the audit, the problem has gone away, and hopefully it'll stay away.
Yeah, I know that, you know, if someone's audited, a town is audited 1 year or has a district 1 year, they're just put back in the hat exactly like everyone else the following year?
Right.
Okay.
Right, because that's the only way to avoid, let's say, people getting lax or telling people if someone wanted to commit fraud. Oh, we were audited last year. I don't have to worry about it. I can commit all the fraud I want for a couple of years. I can be as sloppy as I want to be. So you got to do it randomly every time. Because if I told you I'm auditing your taxes this year, and I said, well, I'm going to guarantee you I'm not going to audit your taxes for the next 3 years, no matter what you do.
Actually, the opposite. Expect us to look next year, too.
Yeah, we could, yeah. You know, it'd be nice if we could take the ones that didn't do so well 1 year, and we could go back in and add them in to the next year. Just keep going until they get it right.
Now, is there some stipulation that if there is a recount on a particular race that is not audited?
Worse than that, the whole town is not, or not the town, but the whole district is exempt from the audit. So my particular town, Glastonbury, is, I believe, going to have it's called a recanvass in Connecticut. Right. It's not as good as a recount in other states. It takes less work, but it is valuable. We're probably going to have one next Tuesday in one race. So that exempts the whole town and all the other races from an audit. So, you know, it's, we could spend more time on that, but statistically it's not a good idea because just because one race is good doesn't mean anything about anything else.
And I maybe shouldn't say this here, and I think it was said partly in jest, but when I went to watch our machines being calibrated or tested or whatever, one of the registrars was saying, you know, it would be nice to have a recanvass so we wouldn't be audited. But New London isn't on the list in any case, and I don't think there's going to be any recanvass this time around.
So you'll be subject to it.
Yes, but 2 years ago there was a recanvass.
I mean, people, you know, when I was in the Army, they said the average private spent 80% of their time trying to figure out how to get away from doing any work. You know, people just, they'd love not to have to do an audit. I'm not quite sure why, because it's really not that expensive. No,
it can be time consuming, and I think you really see as the day wears on how organized places are. Some, I don't know if this is typical, but some places that seem to skimp on the training, the first half hour really making things extra clear and the experience of what I've watched. you spend 3 times that amount of time later trying to make up for small errors that happened,
Right.
or
Well,
small
I
misunderstandings.
like to see teams of 4 people, hand counting, and people keep telling me, oh, that's too expensive and all that, but we've done statistics on it. When you only have teams of 2 people, you end up redoing it so often, it's almost the same
Yes,
cost of doing it with 4 people or 2 people, but you also get a lot more accurate answer when you do it with 4 people. It's a lot calmer if you organize it better. It's less, let's say, breathtaking and less worry at the end,
Right.
that you're going to suddenly find that everything's all mixed up and you got to start right over from the beginning. So that's the kind of stuff you learn. It's kind of like, maybe I'm a little bit of an anthropologist at heart or whatever. So it's kind of, you kind of learn a lot from watching a lot of these. So people tell me, do you get bored watching this? It's a lot more fun than watching paint dry because you get to see people trying to accomplish something in different ways, and you can learn a lot about people and processes as well as a lot about our election system.
So we'll give this information at the end of the show too, but if people are interested in participating in the audit, which starts November 20th and will probably go about 3 weeks with the Thanksgiving in the middle there, you can go to ctvoterscount.org.
Right.
And there's a link
The
you
very
can
first
click.
link's right there. It'll give you some information to read about it, more information than you need to know, really, and then once you get trained and you can learn more. You don't have to learn everything that we present to you, but the more you know, the more, the better you'll do and the more you'll enjoy it.
Now, we just had an election 2 days ago, and before an audit and just keeping track of what happened statewide, were there any elections around the state where things happened that were kind of noteworthy?
I think politically there were some very interesting elections, but I kind of stay out of that realm of it. I have a lot of interest in it, but I really focus on voting integrity. One thing that was kind of interesting was there were several towns that were late in reporting. And Hartford was one of those. It took them until, I think, this morning sometime before they reported results. And besides having very low turnout, they had a relatively simple election. They only had a Board of Education election with 4 openings, 4 candidates on the ballot, and 1 write-in candidate, and they had 3 yes or no questions on there. So, I'm not sure why it took them 3 days to report that. And they had an interesting question on there, and that is, should they get rid of the registrars and replace them with a single registrar appointed by the town council? So there's a lot of things screwy about that, because
New London has 2 appointed registrars, which is very odd in its way, but there is always 1 Republican and 1 Democratic registrar. They get along very well, but having 2 gives you confidence, even if you're not a Democrat or a Republican, that someone's going to look out for your interests.
Right, and wisely, in my opinion, the legislature said that, if a different party than one of the major 2 parties gets elected, they get to be a registrar, but both major parties get somebody represented, because, the Working Families Party in Hartford deserves to be represented because they're the major party in Hartford versus the Democratic Party. But the Republican Party deserves to be represented because the votes the Republicans get in Hartford can affect the election results statewide.
Sure.
So you wouldn't want, let's say, the Republicans claiming that there was fraud in Hartford by the Democrats and not believing the election result. You'd like to have them have somebody in there that can say, they can watch out for their interest, not just in case they might win, but just so that they will accept the result. Sort of like we saw in Florida, it was very hard for Democrats to accept the result in Florida for good reason.
For very good reason. Yeah. It's a problem if someone who's actively working with the campaign is also the chief of the election coordinator.
Right. Now, to Hartford's discredit, when they had 3 registrars, they just added the pay to a third registrar and hired another deputy. There's a lot of registrars in the state that are part-time. Why don't they have 3 part-time registrars and 3 part-time deputies, or get rid of the deputies or get rid of some assistants? They don't need to just, you know, the price and the hours of a registrar isn't written and granted. And just
it's a huge range. Hartford is a very high-priced registrar.
Right. And you know, just because you appoint only one registrar, and by the way, they can appoint more than one according to the law, it doesn't mean that that registrar can't be creative along with the town council and spend a lot of money in patronage. They don't have to be the only one that's paid $80,000. They can hire some compatriots at $79,000, let's say. Okay, beyond that, the idea is professional. I'm in favor of professionalizing our election administration. But professionalizing, it means you got a training program, a career path. Maybe you have election offices around the state with at least 5 people so that people can learn and then take over and run and have some watchdogs over them.
Right.
Okay. They said this person in Hartford should attend the state certification program. There isn't any. They said if there wasn't one, they could attend some national program that doesn't fit Connecticut. But worse than that, they don't hire them with that. They got 180 days after they're hired, and they only have to attend the course. They don't have to pass. That's like saying I want an accountant for my company, and the accountant, as long as he just goes and sit in some accounting class, then he's met the requirement. He doesn't have to pass or get an MBA or know how to add.
So was this promoted within Hartford as a budgetary matter?
It was mainly spearheaded by the Hartford Current. Even before the third registrar was elected, I don't know, 6 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever it was, they started knocking the whole idea beforehand, and they've just kept bringing it forward and bringing it forward. I don't think it's a good idea. It passed by 18 votes in Hartford. The only one of 3 issues on the charter revision that passed in Hartford. But it also has to be passed by the state legislature, and I'm certainly hoping that sanity prevails.
And you said only 18 votes, but they didn't seem to think every canvass was necessary?
Well, Current said in an article this morning that they didn't think there was going to be a recount, a recanvass. I don't believe that's legal. So, I mean, if you're a candidate,
if the margin is less than 0.5,
if it's less than 20 votes, if it's less than 20 votes, there has to be a recanvass. Now, if it's 2 candidates, one candidate can waive it. Okay, and that happens sometimes. But if it's a proposition, yes, no, I don't believe anyone has the right to waive it. Okay, that's, you know, so we'll see what happens. Once again, you know, the reporting on elections isn't always as smart and accurate as you think it would.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that pans out. And I think a lot of people here don't realize when you talk about working families here, we only really see them on the ballot usually as a second line for a Democratic national candidate or a statewide candidate. But in Hartford, working families is really a third party.
Right.
They have, you know, state reps. They have an agenda and a platform that isn't exactly the same as the Hartford Democrats.
That's right, and they're also a party in Bridgeport.
Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, this year, in fact, this is one of the interesting elections, and it's really mostly political, so I'll just be very brief on it. There was a Democratic primary for the Board of Education, and the not the normal wing of the party won that. And there was a working family candidates on the ballot and the Republican Party. So it was a big contest of not so much would the Democrats win, I guess, but it was would the working families be the minor party on the Board of Education, or would the Republicans be the minor party on that? And I think they split the vote. So there's one working families, one Republican. But I think it adds excitement having third parties. And when you got a one-party town, you know, eventually there's disagreements in that party, and there are primaries. But I think having a Green Party and a Working Family Party and in other areas of the state, the Independent Party or the Chatham Party, that adds to what we call democracy.
I think it does too. And in 2009, I actually ran and won a Board of Ed seat cross-endorsed by the Republicans. And it actually made for some interesting coalitions even on the board, because I don't know, you have to make coalitions, and sometimes it was sort of a revolving set of coalitions. It wasn't just one group. Yeah. And I always am concerned, FOI doesn't cover party caucuses, so there's nothing to keep a dominant party from making decisions on matters ahead of time and not really listening to public comment or their colleagues in the public forum. So that's getting political too. So whatever. Sure. So there was this Hartford thing, and actually the Bridgeport primary was watched by many people in New London, because New London is one of the cities in Connecticut that has state intervention, not the same way exactly that Bridgeport does, but some of the candidates were candidates that are part of a pro-public education coalition, because you look down the road at what Bridgeport's going through, and New London might be there in a couple years. Yeah. So you never know.
Sure. Well, I mean, in most towns, I know it's my town, 2/3 of the budget is in the Board of Education. So it's almost, the Board of Education in a lot of towns is getting more important in some ways than the town council.
I think that is true. And I don't know how it is in other cities around the state, but fully, half of the budget of the city is in the education realm.
Well, I think 2/3 in a lot of places, yeah.
Yeah, I think in some of the cities, public safety is a little higher, but in New London, each side of the budget is about $40 million, and and there's not good communication between the two halves of government. So, Board of Ed, it really has a lot of budgetary responsibility. Right. Now, one other thing that was new this year, and I kind of wanted an idea from you how you thought it worked, was the Election Day registration.
Yeah, so you're asking a good guy on that, because I actually headed up Election Day registration in my town. And first of all, I am in favor of Election Day registration, but I have not been in favor of this method of Election Day registration that we have. I'd rather see people be able to go to polling places and do what many other states that have been successful in Election Day registration have done that for years. They take people's word for it, have them sign a pledge, penalty of $2,000 and a year in jail. We got enough trouble getting people to vote. We don't have to worry about them.
So you don't really
time.
I talk about other kinds of ID legislation required around the country.
But in any case, I was really, we had a very low number of people register on Election Day, but I think it had the nature of the election, particular out of town, some other things. But I was happy to see how happy they were registering. Most of them were young people. Some of them were first or second generation Americans. We had some new neighbors of mine that have just moved into the neighborhood a couple months ago and came in and registered there. Every one of them was happy to be there and smiling, and we were happy to service them. So, from that aspect, I really liked it. I worry, though, because what's going to happen in some big city, probably, there's going to be a tight election, and there's a lot of unregistered voters, and a party, and maybe both parties, are going to get the idea, let's get a lot of people to go down there and swing the vote by having them register on Election Day, which I have nothing against that, except this is a relatively slow process, so you need a lot of capacity to handle this, especially if a lot of people show up at 7 p.m. So we could have some real issues with lines and other things associated with that someday around the road. So it's good to start on a low turnout election like this to practice things, but I think we risk saying, this all worked fine and we got no glitches in it. And then maybe we'll have next year in the national election, maybe there won't be anything. Maybe there'll be a very tight governor's race,
Right.
but outside of that, maybe there won't be much. Maybe there'll be a House race, but, you know, and then everything will be another immunity. But then maybe in 2016, the next presidential race, we got another Senate race, we could end up with something close and something very chaotic that would cause a lot of problems. So we got to really look at that. But I do support election day registration, and boy, were those people happy with that option. So, you know, and we did find some things in the way we operated in our town. We could have survived with 2 less people very easily. We could have organized some other things a little differently. The registrars and I are going to work and make it better. Even though it wasn't bad, we learned a lot. So that's the advantage of doing something on, you know, relatively small scale. And we have 169 towns, each one sort of experimenting with it. And so maybe there'll be some lessons learned beyond what we learned.
Well, first of all, I want to agree with you wholeheartedly that I think there could be crowds in the future. I think in New London we saw, and once again, I think it was an opportunity that was there to be taken, that the Democrats did really utilize that. They did a lot of phone banking in the last week
That's great.
of the election, and they got people to go to the polls and register, and you looked at the same day voting results, and you could tell the Democratic Party candidates had 50, 55, 45 votes from the EDR voters, and the Republicans and the Greens had like 1 or 2. So, and I don't think that's a problem, except that it was maybe 60 individuals last Tuesday. If it were 300, what would have
The thing that worries me is other states that have election day registration, you know, they get 5 to 7% increase in turnout because of it. And it would be great if we got that. I don't think we will because this method isn't as good. But to get that 5 to 7%, they're getting 20% and more people registering because people who would have registered early put it off knowing they have this available. Well, and then combine that with cities like Hartford and Bridgeport that have huge turnover in their voting population. You know, if people say, oh, the election day registration works great, and then you can put it in one of those cities, and then you have a close election in the city, or you have a huge national election, or, we could have a situation that we're disenfranchising people and having huge lines.
Well, I know that I saw somewhere that if you get to the polls at 8 o'clock and you're in line, they're supposed to let you vote.
No.
But that is not true.
That's not true on election day registration. I think it ought to be. Okay. But the Secretary of State issued procedures and said if we weren't complete with registering a person at 8 o'clock, we couldn't register anybody else. And the problem with that is the big town doesn't plan well enough, and there's 100 people or 200 people in line. Or I'm in there and I look out at the line at 7:30 and I say, I don't like the looks of those people. They're going to vote for another party. Or my person in charge of registering suddenly starts going slower and slower on her computer. And some people get to vote in this town, and they showed up at 7:45, but they got set up at 7 o'clock over in this town, but we had to shut them off at 8 o'clock, and they were still in line. Or you let them go, and they don't let them go. So I think that's something that really concerns me. I don't think it was a problem in this election, but just because it wasn't in this election, it's a thing sitting there, that a serious issue that could come up.
And I have one more quick question, and then we're going to go to our community calendar. What specific recommendations would you make to just make the process quicker?
Well, first of all, I'd say if you're in line at 8 o'clock, you have a right to vote. And I don't care
the same way you do it.
I don't care if you're there till 3 a.m. You should have a right to register and vote if you can register. We had nobody that wasn't qualified to show up with us, but that's the first change. And then I would probably go and say, let's do it the way the other states do it. Trust the voter. Trust the voter, have them sign the form. If they're not registered in our town, trust them that they didn't vote someplace else. And, you know, if they voted twice, it's going to cost them $2,000 in a year in jail if they get caught, and they probably will get caught. You know, and if I wanted to buy votes or steal votes, you do it through the absentee ballot process. It makes no sense. It makes no sense to do it this way for the voter. Yeah, I laugh at people that say illegal immigrants are voting. I mean, they want to stay under the radar. They don't want to. They probably speed less on the highways or go through stop signs less than anyone else in the country. They're not gonna take time off from their $2 an hour job or something like that to come in and vote.
Well, we're going to take a break of a couple of minutes for our community calendar, and when we come back, if you have questions, feel free to call in.
Hallelujah, Jesus is the only answer that I know. Jesus is the only answer that I know.
Welcome back to Thinking Green. I'm here with Luther Weeks from Connecticut VotersCount, and you are welcome to ask questions. Luther's area of expertise is election, and not just expertise, but passion too, I guess, is election integrity. And, you know, I'm going to start this out with a little bit of a political statement, but I'm not really headed towards a political discussion. In this past New London election, we were hearing a mantra of, Roe B all the way, and people were encouraged to vote all for 14 Democrats all across the line without actually even necessarily knowing the names of the people you were voting for. And I'll pick up the phone in just a second. What I wanted to ask you about, and we'll take the phone call and you can think about it, is other ways we can design a ballot so that I have no objection if someone wants to vote for everyone of the same party, but I feel as though it's a good idea to get more educated. But with that in mind, I don't want to keep the caller waiting. Hi, thank you for calling.
I agree with you 100%. I'm like in awe of people that I've talked to that just voted Democrat, and I asked why, and they said, "Well, you can't do anything, you can't change anything. That's what I am, and that's how I'm going to vote." And then another thing that happened for me watching the community channel is, there are these people corralling people, telling them how to vote, giving them rides. They're non-taxpayers, they don't own property, but yet, and they're getting them to vote to raise the taxes as well. And I'm like, it's a good old boys club, and they're corralling people and telling them how to vote. And no skin off their back because they're not paying taxes. They don't have high property taxes. I'm a single parent, struggling, and I'm paying $7,000 a year, and now my taxes going up again. I want to move out of New London, and I can't because I'm tax locked. I don't mind paying taxes if we had a good system. If we had a good school system, we had something running well in New London. Nothing is running well. My theory is fix what you have first. Make everything transparent. Make the budgets transparent, but fix it first. And then do something good with my money, but just don't dump money after money after money into really bad systems.
Well, thanks for calling, and we're going to go back to the voting part at the beginning of it. Thanks very much, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so we do at some polling places more than others see people giving people rides, which I don't have a problem with. I think people who don't drive should be able to vote. But back to the ballot that makes it so easy for you to tell someone just check, fill all the boxes in a row. What do other places do?
Yeah, I mean, Connecticut and New York famously have this ballot that looks like a lever machine.
Yeah, it really does.
There may be other states with that, but they're very few. A lot of states have what they call a nonpartisan ballot. I don't know if that's the right way to name it. But you'll have a box on the ballot that, let's say, it will list all the candidates for mayor. But it will list them in a random order. Right now, we list them random by the party. They're random for the same office like that. They're randomly selected where they appear. But they randomly select all of them on the ballot. And so it might say, Ronna Green and
yeah, so it might have the party designation
after your name.
So if you want to,
but you have, if you really said, I just want to vote for Democrats, and you got to do a little more work to
you can still do it.
You can still do it, but you got to pick them out. But it emphasizes pick the person, and I have this thing, and it's called the zigzag theory. And if you looked at it on my website, you'd see it. But the way we have the ballot, when you're voting for the town council, even the people that mix their ballot up, they don't go the top line, then the bottom line, and then over here and do a couple. They do it like a zigzag. If they think, I'm going to mix it up between the parties, they do a zigzag. So if you're a candidate underneath the high vote getter in the other party, you don't turn out so well, or vice versa. So it really, that's a very bad effect because it's the random selection has a lot to do, and it isn't so much whether you're top line and bottom line. It's just this thing, and I've seen it happen in town after town. So, and by the way, when you have that kind of a ballot, you actually have a lot more room, because think about it, we try to fit these names into
And the
a
names
box.
are like in 6-point type.
Right, but if you have them go sideways and they're just
And-
one thickness high, you can actually put more on the ballot and have more white space and all that. So there's a lot of things that could improve our ballot. Even leaving it the way it is, it could be improved a lot. So there's almost no end to improving a ballot. The experts tell me, put the directions on the same side of the ballot you're voting on. Don't say look on the back to see how to
And
vote.
no one looks on the back.
Right.
Let's face it,
Right.
no one looks.
So I heard my friend's voice in my mind one time when I was voting, and they said, the instructions, I said, I'll look on the front and see if there's instructions. And there were 2 questions that I forgot to vote on, and I wanted to vote on because of the layout didn't draw
That's true.
my eyes to it. So there's so much that you could improve, or almost even the ones that are the nonpartisan ballots in other states, by using color, by using different fonts, by using, thick lines and thin lines and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot that could be improved, but yeah, this party orientation, I think, causes some things to be not quite as good as they could be with that other ballot.
And I think, in New London, and being a Green minor party, we have sometimes been cross-endorsed by the Republicans. And even that kind of feels like game playing. You put your name on the ballot twice.
Yeah.
It would make more sense to me, really, if the Republicans wanted to cross-endorse. If you have a list, you don't have the name on it twice.
Yeah, you would just say Dem, comma, Republican.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. Yeah.
Because
Right, so
in some ways,
it
it is weird to have a person's name on the ballot twice.
That's right. So, it is kind of funny that way. And, in Connecticut, we have these blinders on, so we may not see the instructions on the back of the ballot, but we don't see what they're doing in other states. We just do it the way we've always done it, and it's hard to imagine something else unless you've been someplace else and you've seen it.
Right, and we are in the minority. I think I saw a list of what cities in this, of the major cities in the U.S. have nonpartisan elections and which ones have partisan elections. And the majority actually do not have the partisan election.
Well, we have having a nonpartisan ballot is different than having a nonpartisan election.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure whether, does that mean you don't have minority representation?
Right.
I don't know exactly what that means,
Now, New London doesn't have minority representation.
Right.
But New London, maybe because it's an old city, does some things differently from all the other cities in the state.
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to talk just briefly about some other issues that you've been involved with that are really voter integrity issues, and things like mail-in voting and internet voting. I know, we have a lot of servicemen overseas, and there's a lot of concern, especially in national elections, whether their votes count.
Right.
What's the right way to do it?
The right way to do it is to, first of all, follow what's called the MOVE Act, and that's for federal elections, and have a state MOVE Act that matches the federal one. They have to have ballots available 45 days before an election and mail them out to people that want absentees. They have to provide those ballots online to soldiers so they can download them, and they can download an absentee ballot application, fill it all out, and put it in one envelope. And guess what? In federal elections, and nobody knows this, they have a free express mail return envelope from soldiers wherever they're deployed in the world. They should have that for all overseas voters as well, not just soldiers. How about the CIA? How about the State Department? How about those NGO people that are out, missionaries, whatever? All of them, not just soldiers, should have that available to them. But, there's supposed to be a voting assistance officer in every post. The government doesn't have that. They don't know about this free mail-in, express mail. The state should pay for it in all elections, not just the federal elections where the federal government does that. That should be available. And states use that. If states promote that to their overseas voters and soldiers, then the states do very well with all of what I just described. And by the way, if we did internet voting over there, the same people that are supposed to help voters understand they can mail things back by this express mail are the ones that are supposed to give them internet access to be able to vote that way. Okay, so it's...
So you don't think internet voting is the answer at all?
So the question is, that I keep getting asked, is banking is so safe, why can't we vote over the internet? Well, there's a good answer to that. The internet voting is a much harder application. But the question I ask, if banks lose billions of dollars with online banking, and they can only do banking because they save more money in tellers than they lose by fraud, and they warn businesses not to use online banking because there's too much fraud, if you can't trust online banking, how in the world should you trust online voting?
Yes, so really, to get all the materials to people wherever they are in the world, the internet is a perfect way to do it. Download the materials and then mail it express.
Right. The real problem is getting the ballots out to them because they move around so fast. Once you get the ballot to them, they know where they are, and all they have to do is mail it home. And those express mails, I think it was something like 90% made it in 5 days, and almost all of them made it within 7 days.
Well, we only have maybe about 5 minutes left, can you give like a 2-sentence summary of what you think the state of voting in Connecticut is?
Well, I think, as we were talking in the break, there's such a thing as integrity and confidence. I think we got a lot of confidence and trust, but we don't know if we have much integrity. But, because we trust all of our local officials. The trouble is they trust all the people that work for them. I don't like trust. I like 2 people in charge of something, so there's got to be a conspiracy to get something done wrong or to cover up an error. I want errors surfaced and resolved. People make mistakes all the time. We correct all mistakes all the time. We can resolve those, but that's where we have too much credibility and no reason to really know.
Okay, we do have a phone call. I want to warn. Hi, thanks for calling. I just want to tell you, you only have like 2 minutes.
I'd just like to hear what he thinks about people voting to raise taxes that are not paying the taxes.
Okay.
I'd like to get his opinion on that.
Okay, what's your opinion on that?
I think anyone that's a citizen has the right to vote. We're not a state where white men and property owners are the only ones that can vote. We're not a country. That's not democracy.
And I talked to you more about things like trends to having strict voter ID laws, but I don't think we have time. And I'd rather you use the time, the 3 minutes you have, to let people know how to participate in an audit, because I started doing this about 2 or 3 years ago, and it really is worthwhile.
Okay, and you're not participating in the audit, you're observing an audit.
Oh, that's true.
Go to ctvoterscount.org.
Sometimes you almost feel like
and
you
you
want to
sign up and you
participate.
tell us several days that you would be available to spend part of that day observing an audit in a town near where you are. And then once you sign up, then we send you links and you can do video training, about an hour of video training. And then we try and match up to a town near where you live. Even if you say I'm available on 10 days, we're assuming you only want to get called on one of those days. And you'll go there, and from our training and what you'll observe, you'll learn a lot about the mechanics of the election process and what it takes to have an election we can trust.
And it is a terrific experience, I have to tell people. Even observing audits in other towns has really helped me watch the ones, like when I collect numbers at the end of the day in a London election. You just become so much more aware of all the different steps, keeping the chain of custody of the ballots secure, and making sure all the serial numbers match, and they're the kinds of things that you really wouldn't just think of when you walk into a polling place.
4 of my
to
observers
vote.
were motivated to run for registrar of voters because of this. 3 of them were elected registrars. 2 of them are still sitting registrars
Oh, wow.
because they got so fascinated, and in some cases they wanted to ensure voting integrity, and what a better place to be ensuring voting integrity to be taking part in that process.
And in most towns, of course, even if you're a third party, you can try to become a registrar and maybe end up with 3, as Hartford does, because we do know that the biggest party affiliation in this state is no party affiliation, and there isn't really a registrar who's specifically assigned to look out for those, people who aren't party members.
Correct.
So thank you very much, Luther. I don't know if there are any primaries due next spring, but whenever you have an audit coming up.
We'll have primaries next August, probably. Maybe for the governor's race we could have
that's true.
at least in one party. We might have some congressional primaries in one party or another.
So,
we have some registrar of voters primaries now and then.
Yeah, so whenever, and perhaps when your report is done, it would be good to get the details on what happened this November. So
Great.
Thanks for coming down. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Next week, we're going to have a musical show, the band Vox Nova. It's going to be pre-taped, and it'll be great and totally different. So thanks again, Luther, and good luck with the audit.
Okay.
Because this is a country where